Good evening. I'm Albert Carnesale, the Dean of the John F. Kennedy School of Government. Welcome to the Albert Gordon Lecture in International Finance. This endowed lectureship was created in 1987 to recognize one of Wall Street's and Harvard's most distinguished citizens and to promote a forum for discussion of issues of great interest to Harvard and to the larger community. Albert Gordon was the guiding vision of Kidder Peabody from his arrival there as a partner in 1931 through 1986 when he resigned as chairman. For those of you not too good at arithmetic, that's 55 years. Al Gordon is now 91 years old, honorary chairman of the board at Kidder Peabody, and, I am told, still very much involved in his work. I also have from the horse's mouth that while he no longer jogs, he does work out on a treadmill every day. So to Al Gordon, we're greatly indebted for making this possible. Past Gordon lecturers have included Paul Volcker, the former chairman of the board of the governors of the Federal Reserve, and Richard Darman, former faculty member at this institution and director of the Office of Management and Budget. I'm particularly excited about this lecture tonight because it truly puts the international back into the Gordon Lecture on International Finance. Now, we have the honor tonight of being introduced to our speaker by someone we know very well, who knows our guest very well, and who knows and understands the challenges of economic reform in Russia as well as does anyone in the West. So to introduce our speaker, I present to you the Douglas Dillon Professor of Government, the former Dean of the Kennedy School, and my good friend, Graham Allison.
Thank you very much, Al, and it's a great honor to welcome back to the Kennedy School Grigory Yavlinsky, not just as a leader of reform in Russia and the former Soviet Union, but as a real colleague of many of us here at the Kennedy School, and for me, a very valued friend. I've had the opportunity to collaborate in intellectual work with a half dozen members of the Kennedy School faculty, indeed to co-author pieces with more than a half dozen, including our dean, Al Carnesale. But I must say of my work with Yavlinsky that none has been more challenging and more rewarding. Grigory Yavlinsky is currently chairman of the board of the Center of Economic and Policy Research, called Epicenter, in Moscow. Grigory Yavlinsky has been the single clearest, steadiest, and soundest advocate of economic and political reform in Russia and the successor states. In August of 1990, Yavlinsky was the principal author of what was the 500-day program, known more popularly as the Stalin Plan, or the Stalin-Yavlinsky Plan. It's interesting to recall that if Gorbachev had adopted that program at the time, as folks last month in Moscow celebrated, the 500th day occurred on February 13. More here locally, in the spring of 1991, Grigory was the Russian chairman of the Joint Program for the Transformation to Democracy and a Market Economy of the Soviet Union, in which a number of us here at the Kennedy School participated. In government, Yavlinsky has served first as Yeltsin's first deputy prime minister for the economy, a position from which he resigned, and then after last August's failed push, he was deputy chairman of the four-man interim governing body of the former Soviet Union and the principal author of the economic treaty that was negotiated and signed in November among the republics as successor states. It's interesting in trying to look back, as we, some of us who worked in this working group were doing today, just as a kind of, I don't know, like an alumni discussion about views in a period of such fantastic change, in which it's very hard, as Grigori always says, to get one's coordinates. So just in case we wonder about Yavlinsky's coordinates, I thought it might be interesting to go back to August of 1990. That's almost 90 years ago in the developments that have been occurring in the Soviet Union, but August of 1990, and the 500-day plan. And let's see what Yavlinsky said, laying it out in the first chapter. He traces three scenarios, one of which is if nothing dramatic is done. And he calls this gradual transformation. And pardon me, but I'm going to read a paragraph here, which I think will be interesting as a point of departure for his comments. He says, the possibility for this scenario is nearly exhausted. This is August of 90. Because it leads to a continuation of the process of disintegration of the economic system and the appearance of dozens of autarkies in regions and national territories. That's one. Okay. The exchange of goods between them will take the form of bartering. As a result, a choice will have to be made between hyperinflation and outright monetary confiscation from the population and the enterprises. The production recession will continue to deepen, and many large enterprises will shut down due to shortages in replenishing supplies. There will be a sharp deficit in consumer and capital goods that can only be offset by means of imports. However, the country will probably be denied new credits. A slump will begin in the big cities, and a decline in productivity of the best-yielding agricultural regions will occur. The consumer market will be ousted by fixed distribution and the black market. So, next paragraph. The economic crash will be deepened by the absence of a unified program of action. Each republic, and then every territory, paren, up to a city district, close paren, will be trying to pull out of the crisis on its own, which will be disastrous in this integrated and over-monopolized economic system. Final paragraph. The political consequences of choosing this scenario will include the final collapse of the Union and the clashing of nationalities in the ethnically heterogeneous regions. Defiance of the law will embrace all spheres of life in society. Please join me in welcoming Grigori Yavlinsky.
Saying honestly, I prefer to the conclusion of my friend would be, and all this wouldn't happen. And that is not truth. But the problem is that is all of this is truth. And now I'm going to, I'll try to explain some current developments of the situation, and then answer any kind of questions you have. First of all, I want to start with the point, what is good? Because I know that the audience in the West likes something what is good, even more than if something is bad. And I can tell you for sure that what is good in Russia today, that the communism would never come back. The democracy is the real goal, and the people want democracy. Yes, people don't know how to build it, in a short time how to construct it, but there is no doubt that the people are dreaming about the real democracy. We have a free press, really free. Everybody, I can say it for sure, everybody is just now looking with a great honor to such categories like private property. Comparatively in economics, you can see a lot of new initiatives and new enterprises, private banks, commodity exchanges, and all other things. I think that in the recent future, Russia would never be more aggressive military power, and that's very good. All these things I would call like ideological environment of the situation just now in the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, or in Russia. And so from this point of view, we are in a difficult position trying to evaluate the current economic reform and current Russian government. From ideological or even to say religious point of view, nothing to say, it's great. The people are making real economic reform. I'm sure that they want to make real economic market reform, democracy in economics for the first time in the last 70 years. But if to come to the same subject from the professional point of view, I have to say that the situation is very contradictory and difficult, and that is very important to understand. First of all, I would say that real economic reform isn't started yet. I mean, real economic reform at least consists from three main parts, at least. Land reform, privatization, and demonopolization of the economy. All these things are just now only on the paper and is not moving forward as fast as it is necessary. In this situation, government declared only one type of the economic policy, only one part of it. That is the monetary policy of stabilization monetary policy. I think that the audience here understands well what means stabilization policy, and you read in newspapers this first steps in January in liberalization of prices and trying to balance the economy to reach the equilibrium by the liberalization of prices and to avoid the hyperinflation and so on. But the problem is that liberalization of prices started in the situation when the government have no real control in the monetary area. It comes to as a consequence that there were no one agreement between republics in economic area which works. That means that political invasion or political obstacles which were created by current politicians makes the success of economic reform at this moment impossible. Look, we have just now using one currency for all republics, that's ruble. But we have in the same time 15 budgets. As an economist, I can tell you that that is a problem to manage with one currency and one budget if you want to make a stabilization policy. But if you have 15 governments and one currency, that's a big problem. You have 15 central banks, you have 15 parliaments, and everybody is going to produce their own economic policy, and they're saying that they would never would coordinate their economic policy because they are independent. And that is the proud of some leaders of the state when they're saying we would use one currency, everybody would have a budget, but we'll never have a common budget for this currency. That means that the political leaders simply don't understand how it works. Then, second question, the government is making economic stabilization in the situation when the borders of this economic stabilization is not clear. Because nobody knows whether the Kazakhstan or Belarus or Ukraine is going to realize the same course or not. It is not clear how many people in future is going to use this type of currency, I mean ruble. The borders is not clear. Everybody is making its own economic policy. Everybody is making its own taxation policy for taxes. Everybody is making their own incomes policy. So in this situation, it is very hard even to predict that some steps may be successful. But from the other hand, the government making these measures are using the enthusiasm of the people for the economic reform, make the people to spend their patience for economic reform, using their will for economic reform. I can tell you that recent analysis showed that the prices jumped up from the 1st of January in foodstuffs, for example, in big cities 20 times. And I can say that recent analysis showed that something about 90% of the people is down of the line of the poverty. 90% in Russia and something about 98% in Commonwealth. That's amazing, but the people are still waiting for having a result. What more I can tell you, taking into consideration that that is a lecture about finance, that is a big question, a new one maybe, of such size. To what extent it is possible to use the macro stabilization policy in the situation of such structure that we have in our country, when the sectors of producing of the consumption goods is something about from 15 to 17% only, 1517. All the other things is heavy industries and military industries. So, and now we are at the level when new question comes. That is really a new question. What kind of economic policy you have to provide in the country of such type as Russia is? I mean that everybody can understand that, and now it's more clear than before, then Russia is a country of countries. You have dozens of governments inside. You have dozens of presidents inside and parliaments, and all of them trying just now to declare their independence. And where you make strong or strict finance policy, monetary policy, what is the response from the local governments? That we have only responsibilities. We have no rights from you. We have nothing from you, only difficulties. So we are also independent as Ukraine. And you would never explain, I repeated several times today, you would never explain to Tatar Republic that from the point of view of independence, they are worse than Moldova Republic. That's impossible. So, structure of the economy and this great potential for disintegration. That is two main dangerous points that we have just now, and to which current economic stabilization policy take into consideration the things that I said before about 15 budgets, and there is absence of possibility to control the monetary field, all this, and credit policy. Every government also is making itself, and every bank, every republic, I mean, and government too is making their own credit policy. Taking all this together, that is the real things which comes as a great obstacles for the success in this economic transformation. And that is very important to understand, because just at the moment the people in the former Soviet Union is looking at the West with a great honor and is waiting for real intellectual and moral support, at least in this economic transformation. And that's very important. And now government declared a new change, new changes in the economic environment, or a new step in economic developments. That is the liberalization of oil prices. In our situation, liberalization of oil prices means that the prices on oil would jump 10 times in one day. That is, I want to ask myself and you, how is it possible to compare the energy crisis of 1974, which was in all industrial developed countries, and the current situation we have? At that time, the prices on oil jumped up from $2 to $8 per barrel of oil, 4 times. And such countries as Japan, having an excellent banking system, having a positive trade balance, having a lot of access in hard currency and whatever else, were struggling with the consequences of this change for 3 years. I mean, inflation, changing of prices, changing of salaries. They have shortages. For the first time after the war, they have lines, they have shortages. And technological programs which have to overcome these consequences of the oil prices crisis in 1974 is just now only finishing at the moment. As far as I know, Canada was dealing with the problems which comes from this 1974 crisis for 10 years. I'm not sure that Britain finished to overcome this situation. Our government declared that in April or in May just now, they would start this enterprise and everything would be okay in autumn. So it means that these developments would bring more and more complicated consequences in economic developments. And one of them also, I see that this changing of the prices for oil, for example, would be the real obstacle for the privatization, for the land reform, for the other things. I can give you the example. Not so long ago, we were trying to push forward as fast as we can land reform, and the people were eager to buy some land, let's say 20 miles from Moscow. It was absolutely normal, and the people were very enthusiastic about this. But taking into consideration that the prices on oil would be 10, 15 times higher, all process stopped. I don't want to say that it is not necessary to liberalize the prices. I don't want to say that it is not necessary to realize the stabilization policy. Now, I was one of the first people in the country who were pressing exactly this bottom as the very important. But I want to say that only coherent plan, take into consideration what are you going to do, where are you doing this, and how to do this is possible. It is possible to, with such plan, it is possible to think about success or something. And the situation that we just now, a lot of people are asking me, for example, what is possible to do from the economic point of view at the moment. And I can give you the analogy. Maybe this analogy would be a little bit strong, but I want to give you the feeling of what is possible to do. All these processes are already going forward. They are already in line. Like, if to make a comparison or analogy, so economy is swallowed already, let's say a laxative pill. Yeah? And our politicians just now are trying to give to the economy or to the people sleeping pill. And you can imagine what would be the outcome. So I prefer to say truth and to say openly what's going on and to be brave enough to make choice between two possibilities we have at the moment. One possibility is hyperinflation, strong. The other possibility is before hyperinflation, terrible unemployment, if the current situation would develop as it is just for the moment. So the outcome from this point is to prepare country for hyperinflation and to avoid this terrible unemployment, otherwise it'll be a social explosion. But still, I want to say that third very important point is, or second very important point is, to make alive, to realize the economic treaty between the republics. That is the economic treaty about free trade. All of the leaders of the republics are saying that they want to have a market economy, and in the same time making the terrible obstacles for free trade. How can you put all these things together? And that is crucial to implement this economic treaty between the republics. Until there would not be negotiations between the republics about the banking system, about monetary system, about, let's say, credit policy, and all other things, there is no way until they are using the same currency, all of them. And there is a question very often to me that, wait a little, the people said, but republics want to implement their own currency. They want to be independent. Okay? There is no obstacles for this, but there is only one question: when they are going to implement this own currency. Look, for example, Baltics are saying that they are going to introduce their own currency for 3 years. They're knocking at the door with this question all the time. Still, they are using ruble. Ukrainians, that was a banner to implement their own currency. They implement coupons. At the beginning, one coupon was 10 rubles, then just at the moment, differently from the area, it is 25 kopecks. And the only thing they are saying from time to time that they are leaving the ruble space. How they can leave the ruble space, nobody knows. But the people are listening to this and say, we think tomorrow morning we're leaving ruble space or something like this. But that makes a great difficulties to implement any kind of economic policy. It means that making in one time political and economic reform makes too much pressure to the people. And it was my point before, now I think that it's a pity, but it's so that making political and economic changes of such size, you would stop any kind of economic changes and would follow only political one. That's impossible to make all these things together. And that's coming, it seems that that's truth. Now, the question about the future, I mean the future of, let's say, Yeltsin's government, what can happen with Yeltsin's government and all these new democratic forces in the country. I think that I already emphasized that that's impossible to predict some changes in the sense that all country would be covered by some totalitarian regime or something like this. But it may be an attempt. If till the autumn, and that's very likely, if till the autumn the changes would not be positive enough, so the person which swallowed the pills will wake up and would ask the doctors, what happens? And more pain just now, more difficulties for the people just now, more force of social explosion would be later. And that is very important. So Yeltsin's government in this sense have different scenarios how to move forward. One of them, that in the nearest Congress of People's Deputies, Yeltsin would appointed the prime minister instead of himself. That means that he would make a shift a little bit from the government to guarantee the continuation of the strategic course. The other possibility is that the forces who are just now pressing Yeltsin with this type of the policy would overcome, and he would make another type of the government, which would be very like Ryzhkov's government, trying to stabilize the economy by the common measures. And the third scenario is that he would try to continue the line he have just accomplished today, and would try to liberalize the prices on oil and all this, everything what was in memorandum to the IMF from the Russian government. In any case, I think in the middle of the summer, it would be the right time for any type of the government to say that we are in the situation of hyper-stagflation, because I can tell you that even government is saying that the decline of production this year would be 50%, 5-0. And in official papers they are showing 30%, 3-0. That is enough, but 5-0, that's even hard to imagine how it works after 5-0 decline. So in the middle of the summer it would be necessary to declare that we are in the hyperinflation and start a new type of the policy which is very close to the policies which is necessary to realize in this situation. But to a great extent it would depend also from these disintegration processes and the political approach. If the leaders of the republics would understand that their priority number one is not to dig the borders immediately, but to start the economic negotiations and to realize economic treaty as soon as possible, that'll be the only way out of this situation. There is no contradiction. I think you understand this. There is no contradiction between the economic treaty and independence of the republics. There is no. I was giving today such an example, and I'll give it once more. Can you imagine that you are in a hotel on the 20th floor, for example, and it's a pity, but you have a heart attack, and you need fresh air immediately. There is two options to get this fresh air. One, to jump to the window, and you'll have fresh air this the same moment. The other is a little bit more difficult. It is necessary to pass through the elevator, then to come down, then to pass the lobby. You will have the fresh air too. So making economic treaty for 3 years, for example, passing this period, that is the same. And at this moment, it looks like the person jumped from the window, and all press all over the world is discussing the problem. By what finger he is scratching his ear while he is flying down. It's very important. Everybody is asking, in what areas the decline of production would be more? In heavy industries or in military industries? What is the rate of inflation? Exactly, with a comma. Where is the sense of such analysis? So that'll be a very important line in the middle of the summer. And the last point, I think that you would ask me what the West can do. That's the obligatory question. And I would say that the main thing is that it is necessary to take together all historical experience and all knowledge in economic area and political area, in negotiation area, in military area, all the things to take together and to, with the people from former Soviet Union, to create a concept about vital interests of the West and vital interests of the people who are living on the 1/6 part of the world in this dramatic changes, taking into consideration that all these events that I'm just now describing is going in the military superpower still. I mean, in a sense, the nuclear weapons are there, chemical weapons are there, biological weapons are there, and all this is in the split. And the split have one very important feature. When you have a split, you can't find the solution. And the Westerners are saying to us, please find a solution and we will help you. But that is the nature of the situation. I don't know where is the chicken and where is the egg. What comes first? That we can't find the solution, and that is the reason why we have a split? Or we have a split and that's why we can't find the solution? But that is not so important. Important is to understand that to managing the split, it is necessary to have a third force, strong force, smart force, which is using the people who are in the split in the sense that working together, finding the solution of this situation. And that is not the question about the money. That is a question about the strategy, how to move forward. From this point of view, I think that the suggestion which was prepared here in this, exactly in this building, I mean the great bargain, as you said, or we said agreement for a chance in Russian, was a right example how it is possible to do. Some people are saying that it was too early, but okay, it is better than too late. So, I want to say as a conclusion that until we have no tremendous blood, everything is possible. Thank you.
As is the local custom here, Grigory is pleased to try to address questions. There are microphones on both sides of the main floor, and if you'll stand up at the microphones, put your question directly, we'll give Grigory a chance to try to answer, and we start over here.
I would try.
Thank you. There has been much sharp criticism of Gaidar's government policies, but you were not very much explicit. What would you do differently? There has been much arguments, very strong arguments regarding the bad aspects of the current policies. But just let's imagine, starting from April, you were in charge of economic policies. What would you do differently?
As far as I understand, you have two questions. What I'm going to do before and what I'm going to do just now, yes?
Yes.
Or you have one question?
No, actually, how you see the situation right now. We are not talking about a 500-day plan, which
we are not talking about the economic treaty?
Yes, it's also included. But how do you see the situation starting from now, from April, for instance?
Okay. First of all, I would say that it is impossible just now to manage the economic situation without new political line, new political approach. Mainly the political approach in the relationship between the republics, between the former Soviet Union republics and between the republics inside Russia. So you have to, Russia is a dominanta in all this region. If Russia would take course that Russia needs economic treaty inside and outside for 3 years or 5 years, all republics would sign this treaty, once more even, and they would realize it. That's number one. Secondly, I told you that just at the moment the pill was swallowed and now we are only waiting for results of this process. That's why we have to prepare all country for real hyperinflation. And some period for 3 or 4 months, it will be possible to move strongly if we would stop this type of policy we have just now, to move more actively privatization and price liberalization in accordance with the privatization. And I think that it is necessary to be prepared for monetary reform, money reform, as soon as possible. That's the key points. But once again, first we have to solve political questions there. And also I would start the negotiations with the world community about the support of such type of reform. So the main border between two types of policies is Gaidar's government is saying Russia is going alone and we are making reforms separately. Well, number one, and second, we are making financial stabilization. I'm answering, no, we can't make it successfully separately. We have to reach a treaty with the help of Western community, with the help, I don't know, with the help of God, but we have to do this first. Secondly, it is not enough to start with the monetary financial stabilization. We have to start structural changes. That's very important, especially with the privatization. That's the difference.
A follow-up question. You mentioned the problem of reducing the Russian Federation's budget deficit. What would you do differently as compared to what the Gaidar government is doing?
I'm not going to declare that I will have the budget without deficit, simply because that's not truth.
Okay, but in terms of your agenda, how would you spell out what measures you would undertake in order to reduce the budget deficit?
The budget deficit?
Yes.
The budget deficit, I can tell you one thing, only one example. That's a long discussion, and I can give you the figures. But I can give you only one example. 2 weeks ago, in Ukrainian parliament, were discussed the budget of Ukraine in rubles. And they were discussing the budget, where is the 600 billion incomes and 1 trillion expenditures. In this situation, what for I have to tease the people in Russia with this budget deficit? What for? There is no reason. And that's very dangerous. So I would start the negotiations about the budget policy. At the end of this negotiation, I would say, okay, I want to say directly, if you are not going to coordinate efforts before you are implementing your own currency, and you don't care about my own currency, I'm not going to use this kind of currency. I'm changing the currency immediately. What are you going to do? I don't know.
Thank you. Let me see, Professor Stan Fisher, would you like to make a comment or ask a question? Professor Fisher is visiting from MIT, worked on this joint program, and is formerly the chief economist of the World Bank. And he didn't have his hand up, so I called.
So what I was going to do next month, was that? You talk about the structural reforms and what has to be done and so forth. What exactly would you start doing on the structural side, and in what sequence would you do the structural reforms and the macroeconomic stabilization?
So, the first thing, what I'm going to suggest in the structural reforms is using the machinery of privatization. That's the first point. And using the heavy industries which deals with the resources. I would use all potential of these things into the direction of restructuring the main, step-by-step main branches. And maybe you remember we have created a special plan in Harvard plan about the infrastructure for these purposes, about the banking policy for these purposes, about the credit policy for these purposes, and price policy for these purposes. So all these things. So I would try to make the whole package and to address this package to the structural reform. And I would be very careful in order not to cross these two types of the policies, monetary policy and structural reform.
Just come with a follow-up question. You said today at MIT as well that this government, that there won't be a government as committed to reform as this one. I don't have the sense that the type of reforms that we're talking about here are in fact approved by the Parliament, and that there are important cross-currents in trying to get things moving in Russia. Is that right, or is that wrong?
Sorry, please clarify what's about the Parliament?
Well, you have a finance minister and a president who are committed to very radical reforms.
Yeah.
Is that true of the Parliament as well?
And what is the problem with the Parliament? The Parliament have no real executive power at all. The Parliament is only shouting. They're taking the decisions. The President is taking the decision. Vice Prime Minister is taking the decisions. And the Parliament, I can tell you for 100% that the people in the Parliament knows about these decisions 10%, not more. 10%. Because a lot of decisions they are taking as the executive power is not even necessary to adopt in the Parliament. With the parliament, main problems were solved, that we need privatization, the parliament adopted this. We need land reform, okay, parliament adopted. So from this point of view, there is no problems. There is a problem that laws are not very good, that it is very hard to implement them, that the parliament is trying to interfere in this policy or whatever else. Yes, there is such a problem. But there is the answer on this problem. In Russia, just today, nobody cares about the laws. So if you want to make, you are prime minister, you want to make privatization, you can make a decision that you are making corrections to the law for 3 months and you will reach there. So I think that the parliament is not the obstacle.
Last question. I've heard, though, that it's even impossible to get the local authorities to do the small-scale privatization, that this support is not actually there effectively for a program of this type.
Stan, I invite you on the 4th of April to Nizhny Novgorod.
I'm teaching a class that day.
Yes, and I invite you with all your students to Nizhny Novgorod on the 4th of April. It will be the auction, the first big auction in Russia, where they are going to sell 70 shops in one day, 70, with the help of World Bank. And I think it will be the best example when the local authority is like in this region, everything can be done. Nothing is going on in Moscow, for example, but in this region, it's going forward. So it's a great difference from region to region. It depends on the people there.
Okay, back to the microphone.
My question is very much related to the point you just made about this auction, and also about questions of privatization and land reform. Given the income distribution and the wealth distribution right now inside the former Soviet republics, who do you think is going to be buying firms, is going to be buying these shops, these 70 shops, is going to be buying land and apartments if they are sold and privatized? And to the extent that average Russians are incapable of buying it, is there any hope that in the near future there would be a banking system that would arise such that people could purchase, at least in some small way, land or other goods?
There is different issues in this question. First one is that certainly just now the situation becomes more complicated because after this price uprising, the people lose a lot of money. You understand? Sure. And that's makes the privatization policy harder. That's number one. Secondly, I want you to share the view that we have no market, so we have no real price. So the prices can be symbolic prices. That's necessary only to push it forward. There is no real price, so we put the prices, it is the prices that the people is ready to buy. That's the only not, I'm against simply to share everything, because that's not my approach. I think it'll be a terrible thing, and it would not be a real privatization. But in everyday life you can compare. You are like a local authority, you can imagine what prices you can put in order to reach the success in privatization. But for privatization, the people needs two conditions, two main conditions. First, to be sure in political situation and to be sure in the financial situation. That's two main conditions. In this situation, the privatization would move very quickly.
As a follow-up question, would you, on the one hand, allow Westerners with their money to come in and participate in these auctions? And secondly, even you said people are very eager. I'm curious exactly who is very eager. From what I understand, the people with the most money, that is the Russians with the most money, may have belonged to the mafia, black market, whatever. And there may be a lot of resentment, it seems to me, to allowing these individuals to take advantage of the fact that they now have money to capture in these goods in the privatization process.
First of all, you're asking me who is very eager to do this. It is a long list of names, and I'm not sure that I can name all of them. Everybody wants to have property. That's the first thing. Secondly, you're asking me about the black market. You know, the black market is the market which works not under the legal law. Yeah? This is an old story for the Soviet Union and for Russia. Every economic step 2 years ago was called black market. So I prefer today to forget about this. Corruption is another story, but black market, certainly it's better to have a white market or even gray. But I prefer black market to command system, by the way, because it's market, it works. What about the foreigners? I would say that yes, to some extent. It depends on the social situation in this region. In some regions, there is no very difficult to attract foreigners to buy something. In some regions, it is not clear for me. In some regions, I know that it's just at the moment better not to do. It depends. But like a lion, no questions. It's necessary to do.
Back to this microphone, please.
You stressed it throughout your speech that no economic problems of Russia and other republics can be dealt with, let alone solved, without a new political arrangement, a treaty. And you repeat it throughout your speech, which obviously is a central thought of your presentation. Now, if the Russian Republic itself cannot clear its mind, decide what it really wants to do, the president, vice prime minister, parliament. Let's imagine that you persuaded 15 such governments and republics and parliaments to agree on a treaty. Then, presumably, for this treaty to be implemented, because how do we know that the treaty will be implemented if even internal laws of Russia are not being implemented? Presumably, to secure the implementation of the treaty, we need to have an agency which will enforce it, perhaps a new super government above Russian government and above Ukrainian and others. Are you advocating the restoration of the Soviet Union?
I would... Okay, thank you. I would clarify this question. It may be a different approach to the idea of a treaty. One people making treaties need third force to control both of them, whether they are implementing this treaty or not. That is a primitive Soviet approach. Normal people, I'm sorry, normal people are realizing the treaty because it is a treaty. And you signed it.
But normal people realize the law, but you don't realize.
Whether the normal people realize the goal? The law. Once again, the same people who do not realize the law, in Ukraine, for example, let's say, for example, who do not realize the law in Russia can't sign the treaty and implement the treaty. That is the same things. And as they can't realize the law, they can't realize the treaty, and even if to make one more government or 3 more governments, it wouldn't work. I'm saying about the people who would come after these people, who would have in mind that the treaty you have to realize because it is a treaty, and the law you have to realize because it is a law. That's it. And I think that, you know, the main roots of the current political leaders in our country and why they don't realize the treaties, laws, and so on. Because they have a big past history which was ignorated any kind of laws, any kind of treaties. It was a revolutionary approach to the law.
There are those of us in the West who are very anxious to find a way to help, but you've pointed out that the political issue is a fundamental issue and it's a threshold question where we can be of little help. How can you create a situation where the West can help, keeping in mind that the problems, it seems to me, include first demilitarization on a major scale, demonopolization of most of the major industries, economic stabilization, monetary stabilization, and political stability? How would you go about channeling aid into what used to be the Soviet Union? At what levels would you put in money and technical assistance? And how can we be sure that it would that the people at those various levels would be receptive to the messages that the Western, to the conditions that would be put on Western aid in order to try to improve the situation?
Simply, from the professional point of view, I would say that I prefer to start all these things from the infrastructural issues, like banking and monetary system and like this, and then to channelize the assistance to the private sector, not to give to the government at all. Only in one case it is necessary to help the government, only in the monetary area. But once again, I want to say that it is necessary, recalling the last question before yours, it is necessary to clarify, to take part in clarifying to the leaders of those new independent states what are the main goals for the 3, 5, 4 years in order to reach this stability. Otherwise, we come to the situation when the West spent $5 trillion in the last 40 years, and the West buy for this $5 trillion tremendous instability. I think the price is too much.
Well, what mechanisms would you use to channel money to the new emerging private sector within the former Soviet Union?
It depends on the concept which would be taken. If the republics would agree that they would stay in one currency, with one currency for 3 years or 5 years or 1 year, in this case it is possible to channel it through making a new banking system or making stabilization fund for a new currency. There's two different possibilities. In case the republics would say that they would leave the one currency space, it'll be another approach, and in this case it is necessary to have a talk with different republics. But the only thing I know that only Russia presented the economic program. I never heard that the other republics presented any type of economic problem, but it is very good or very bad, no programs at all. So from this point of view, in case they are going to be separated, you have to ask them what type of economic policy they are going to realize. And that will be the answer on your question. So I want to say that one answer on your question is impossible. It depends on a lot of conditions.
Thank you. Just comment that it sounds like you're talking about an institutionalized venture capital fund which would require enormous supervision, and I'm not sure how it would work.
Why don't we go back to the right side, please?
Yes. In discussing the choices of either hyperinflation or terrible unemployment, as you put it, you appear to be dealing with a situation in which it is almost impossible for the country to come out of it in a positive way. I'm sure you are aware that the government of Poland at this very moment is struggling internally with which choice to make, hyperinflation or accept terrible unemployment. If you accept hyperinflation, you then create an economic climate in which Western investment will be reluctant to come to the aid of Russian industry and to assist in privatization. If you create terrible unemployment, then you have a socially unacceptable result for the people of that country. Isn't there a middle ground? Isn't there a third way that will avoid having to make either one of those serious and very difficult choices?
Today morning in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, when I was speaking about the two choices, hyperinflation and unemployment, somebody told me that you'll have both. I think, yes, we'll have both. And that is simply an art of the reformer, how to make the equilibrium of all this.
Do you feel it's possible that there can be a balance achieved?
No, but I'm sorry, whether it is possible or not, there is no other way. It is impossible for one person, for another person, for third person, for fourth person, but somebody have to do this. We have to pass this period. That is the way we have to go. We are making market for ourselves, not for anybody else. That is our main task. And that will change a lot of things. A lot of things will change on this area. Because just now, look, not making real reforms in the many areas, we are standing on the point only in international or between the different ethnic groups, nationalities, contradictions. Simply contradictions is coming more and more sharply on this way. And I prefer to change the order. Let us move for 3-5 years with the economic reform because we have a common space, we have no, just at the moment already, common economic space. We have a common space of economic problems. We all have the same problems. So we can start with this. Because the privatization, land reform, demonopolization, and all these things, the republics or local authorities, or I don't know, everybody would do in the way he wants to do. It is not necessary to manage it from Moscow or forever. But there are several things that it's necessary to do. Agreement, treaty, currency, these things.
So you feel that you will accept hyperinflation for a foreseeable period of time in order to get through to what you feel will be a stabilization? Yes,
I think that the massive unemployment just now in Russia is unacceptable. Yes. Unacceptable at all. Because the country is absolutely unprepared for such thing.
Yes.
Because if you'll have in a half a year 15 million unemployment people, that'll be something. I don't know. I'm not a Hitchcock to describe what's going on with this.
Try anarchy.
Okay. Thank you.
First of all, do you think Russia can develop the infrastructure, like the roads, etc., necessary to improve the transportation and trade within Russia and with other countries?
Maybe not so long, but clear. Okay? It's not clear for me.
Okay. Can they develop an infrastructure to just improve their trade?
In what sense
like
the Russia can do this? In what sense?
Like I'm talking about roads and
I understand. In what sense you are asking me? Whether the Russian people can make roads?
The Russian government can, or anyone, or the private sector, or whoever.
No, Russian government just now can't do anything because they have no money, they have ruined the economy, they have no relation with the republics, with the regions. They are just now in the situation of
okay.
Yes, but practically, if to organize all this process, why not?
Could the West, you think, provide the assistance to do this?
I think that at the very beginning of any kind of assistance, I think that the investments in this area would be most important. At the very beginning of all, it is the first thing to do.
Okay. And also, do you think that the Russian nationalists pose a threat to democracy and to minorities?
Sorry.
Okay. Do you think that Russian nationalists, like Pamyat, for instance, do they pose any threat to democracy or to minorities?
No, I think that they are very weak at the moment. They are dangerous in a personal sense. If they would catch somebody personally. But as a political force, no.
On the right?
You know, I listen and I get the feeling of a kind of an Alice in Wonderland. These are desk admirals, or as the Russians say, kabinetные ученые. there is some kind of an unreality about it. You talk about the background of the people in power. We know all of them, almost all of them, are apparatchiks who have different culture, political culture, and so on. Nobody said anything about the work ethic of the Russian workers. The Russians have been pretending to work for 70 years. How are you going to solve this problem?
Okay, that's very easy to answer. If I would put the goal that the Russians would have to live the day after tomorrow like Americans or like Germans, that's impossible. I'm not speaking about this. I'm speaking only about one thing: to give Russians, Belarusians, Ukrainians, and the others the possibility to be a real man in a real economy. To what extent they would be successful, I don't know.
But the Russians forgot how to work.
No, but that's their problem. My problem to give them property, to give them banking system, to give them real monetary system, all these things which is necessary to give to the people, to say to them, okay, now you are set, goodbye, go forward. You don't want to work? Go to bed.
This will have to be the last question here on the left.
Mr. Yavlinsky, in 1990, Gorbachev rejected your program and Soviet Union wasted 2 years on the way of economic reforms and finally disintegrated. Now you appeal to the economic treaty. But I am afraid that even it would be signed, it wouldn't work. And what do you think about the implementing in Russia its own currency in order not to be disintegrated as a former Soviet Union?
So what I'm thinking about what?
About implementing in Russia its own currency in order not to be disintegrated as a former Soviet Union.
I would say that successful implementing of own currency, even like this, successful implementing of the currency would be very strong thing in order not to go to the disintegration. No question. But for this purpose, you need to answer this devil's questions. Where are the borders? Who is going to use this currency? Because you need to ask the West to give you a stabilization fund. That is the point. While giving you a stabilization fund, they would ask you, how many people is going to use this currency? And you have to answer. Where are the borders of using this currency and all these things? If you can avoid answering this question and got the stabilization fund, no problem. It will be a very useful thing, if it is possible to do.
I'm speaking within Russian territory. About the Russian territory.
What does it mean within Russian territory? But look, how this system works. You're coming and asking, please give me the stabilization fund for making my new currency. But all other republics, Ukrainian Republic, Belarusian republics, Kazakhstan, all the others, all this team would come tomorrow to me asking me the same if I'm responsible. For example, I'm IMF. They would come to me. So at the very beginning of your question, I'm going to ask you, who is going to use this currency? You are saying only Russia. Only Russia. I have to answer myself the question what Ukrainians are going to do.
It's their business.
Yes, it's their business for you. But if I'm IMF, it's business for me.
But you're not IMF. Thank you.
Let me thank Grigory for being with us again tonight. Let me say what a pleasure it is to have Grigory Yavlinsky back here with us, and a special privilege to have him here as the Al Gordon Lecture, and to have Al Gordon, 91 years young, sitting beside his good friend Tom Cabot, who's 94 years young. So thank you very much.